The classroom smelled like vanilla, and something sweet that Doyun could never quite name. It was a Velkari scent, natural to their kind, and after 3 years on Havenmoor Station, it meant home to him now. 12 small faces stared up at him with eyes too large for their heads. The Velkari cubs sat in a circle on the soft floor, their striped fur catching the artificial light. Their tails swished back and forth with excitement. They knew story time was coming. "Today I will tell you about lions," Doyun said, sitting down cross-legged among them. "They are big cats from my planet. Very big. Much bigger than you." Isul raised her small paw. Her fur was silver and black, beautiful even by Velkari standards. "Are they nice, Teacher Doyun?" "Sometimes," he said with a smile. "But mostly they are hunters, predators." "Do you remember what that word means?" "Animals that eat other animals," Minho answered. He was braver than the others, always sitting closest to Doyun. His orange-striped fur made him look like the tigers Doyun had once seen in old Earth zoos. "That's right. And lions protect their families very strongly. If something threatens a lion's cubs, the lion will fight. They will even die to protect their young." The cubs made soft chirping sounds, their way of showing surprise. Jiwan, the smallest of the group, tilted her head. "Die? But why? Can't they just hide?" Doyun looked at her gentle face and felt his heart squeeze. The Velkari didn't understand violence. Their whole species had evolved on a world without predators. They had never needed to fight. They barely understood the concept, because some things are worth dying for, he said softly. Family is one of those things. Love is one of those things. Bora, the adult Velkari who supervised the cubs, stood near the doorway. She was tall and elegant, her blue fur always perfectly groomed. She made a small sound of disapproval. "Teacher Doyun, perhaps we should discuss gentler topics. The cubs are young." But the cubs were already asking more questions, climbing into Doyun's lap, touching his face with their soft paws. He was strange to them, this human with no fur and odd flat teeth, but they loved him. He had been teaching them for 2 years now, ever since he'd arrived at Havenmoor as a cultural ambassador. "I want to hear more about Earth," Isul said. "Tell us about wolves, you promised." So, Doyun told them. He told them about packs and loyalty. He told them about humans, too. About how people on Earth formed families not just by blood, but by choice. The cubs listened with complete attention, absorbing every word. Later, after the lesson ended, Doyun walked through the station's main corridor. Havenmoor was beautiful, built by 5 different species working together. Gardens grew under artificial suns. Water features made musical sounds. Velkari moved peacefully through the halls, carrying art supplies and scientific equipment. They were scholars and artists, every one of them. His communicator buzzed. The message was from Station Command, marked urgent. Korvath fleet movements detected in nearby sectors. All stations on alert. Doyun felt ice in his stomach. The Korvath were different from the Velkari. They were warriors, conquerors. Their empire had been expanding for 50 years, swallowing smaller civilizations. Everyone knew about them. Everyone feared them. He found Bora in the council chamber. 3 other Velkari elders were there, their faces calm despite the news. "You've seen the reports?" Doyun asked. "Yes," Bora said. Her voice was peaceful, unbothered. "We have sent diplomatic messages. The Korvath are reasonable beings. They will talk with us." "They're not reasonable," Doyun said, trying to keep his voice steady. An elder named Taehyun spoke. His white fur showed his age. "Violence is not the answer, Teacher Doyun. It never is. We have always found peaceful solutions." 8. T. 8. 8. T. "Because you've never met anyone who refused peace," Doyun said. He knew he was being rude. But fear made him bold. "Please, Let me at least prepare the cubs. Teach them to hide, to stay quiet in emergencies. The elders looked at each other. Finally, Bora nodded. If it gives you comfort, you may have emergency drills, but there will be no violence. That is not our way. Over the next week, Doyun taught the cubs a new game. He called it Silent Mouse. When he gave a signal, they had to run to a special room he'd prepared and stay completely quiet. The cubs thought it was fun. They didn't understand it might save their lives. Isul was the best at the game. She could stay silent for an hour, barely breathing. Am I doing good, Skyfather? She asked. The cubs had started calling him that, a Velkari term for a male who cared for young that weren't his own. You're doing perfect, he told her, stroking her soft head. Remember, if I ever signaled during a real emergency, you run and hide. No matter what you hear, no matter what happens, you stay hidden until someone safe comes for you. Promise me. Her big eyes looked into his. I promise, Skyfather. But you'll be with us, right? Doyun hugged her close. Always, he lied, because some lies are kindness. The Korvath ships arrived on a Tuesday morning. There was no warning. No communication. The station's alarms screamed to life. And Doyun was running before his mind fully understood what was happening. He ran to the classroom where the cubs had morning lessons. They were terrified, making high-pitched distress calls. Bora was trying to calm them, but her hands were shaking. The game, Doyun shouted over the alarms. It's time for Silent Mouse. Right now. The cubs recognized his voice, his authority. They ran. All 12 of them, racing down the corridor, toward the hidden room. Doyun ran with them, Bora close behind. Through the station windows, he could see the Korvath ships. They were massive, ugly things, built for war. Smaller craft were already latching onto the station's hull. They reached the shelter. It was a maintenance room. Doyun had modified, reinforced, stocked with food and water. He pushed the cubs inside. Remember the rules, he said. Silent, no matter what. Minho grabbed his hand. You're coming too? I need to lock the door from outside, Doyun said. It's safer that way. I'll be right here. Isul looked at him with those two knowing eyes. You're going to fight, aren't you? Like the lions. Doyun knelt down, meeting her gaze. Some things are worth fighting for. You are one of those things. He kissed her forehead, touched each cub one last time, and sealed the door. Through the small crack in the frame, he could see their faces watching him. Bora stood in the corridor, frozen. What do we do? Trime. You hide, Doyun said. He picked up a plasma cutter from a tool rack. It wasn't a weapon, but it would have to be enough. Find somewhere safe. What will you do? He looked at the door where 12 cubs were hiding. I'm going to make sure nothing reaches them. The sound of boots on metal echoed down the corridor. Heavy boots. Many of them. Doyun stood in front of the shelter door and waited. His hands didn't shake. His heart was steady. He thought of lions and wolves, of all the stories he'd told. He thought of earth and honor, and the simple truth that some things were worth dying for. The Korvath soldiers rounded the corner, and Doyun raised his tool like a sword. Not one step further, he said. The Korvath soldiers stopped. There were 7 of them. Tall reptilian beings covered in dark scales and combat armor. They carried weapons that hummed with deadly energy, their yellow eyes fixed on the human standing alone in the corridor. The leader made a hissing laugh. Move aside. Soft skin. We're here for the station's tech vaults. No, Doyun said simply. Another Korvath tilted his head. There's one of you. 7 of us. You have a tool. We have military-grade plasma rifles. Think about this. I have thought about it, Doyun said. His voice was calm. You're not getting past me. Inside the shelter, 12 cubs pressed against the door crack. Isul's paw covered her mouth to keep from making any sound. They had never seen anyone stand against violence before. In their world, when confronted, You talked. You negotiated. You never, ever fought. But Doyun was human. And humans were different. The Korvath leader raised his rifle. Last chance, human. Doyun moved first. He wasn't a soldier. He'd been a wildlife ranger back on Earth, someone who tracked animals and protected parks. But he'd trained in basic combat like all humans who worked in space. More importantly, he'd decided that these cubs would live, whatever it cost him. The plasma cutter screamed to life, and Doyun threw himself at the nearest Korvath. What happened next was chaos. The Velkari cubs had never witnessed violence. Their species didn't fight, didn't even understand aggressive contact. But through that crack in the door, they saw everything. They saw Doyun slam the plasma cutter into a Korvath soldier's neck joint, where the armor was weakest. They saw the soldier fall. They saw their teacher move like water, rolling under weapon fire that scorched the walls black. The second Korvath went down when Doyun used a fallen rifle, not shooting but swinging it like a club into the soldier's knee. The crack of breaking bone echoed. "He's fast," Minho whispered, his young voice filled with awe. But speed wasn't enough against 7 trained warriors. A plasma bolt caught Doyun in the shoulder. He screamed but didn't stop moving. He grabbed a fallen soldier's knife and kept fighting. The corridor became a nightmare of blood and energy fire. The third Korvath fell when Doyun drove the knife up under his armor plates. But the other 4 had spread out now, taking positions. They were professionals, and their surprise was over. They fired together. Doyun was hit twice more, once in the leg, once in the side. He stumbled, falling to one knee. "Sky Father," Isul whimpered behind the door. Jiwan held her back, tears streaming down her small face. Doyun looked at the door. Even bleeding, even dying, he looked right at the crack where he knew they were watching. His face was pale from blood loss, but he smiled. A Korvath soldier kicked him in the chest. Doyun rolled with the impact, somehow getting back to his feet. He was swaying now, barely standing. "Why?" the Korvath leader demanded. "Why die for them? They're not even your species." Doyun's laugh was wet with blood. "That's exactly why you'll never understand." He attacked again. This time he had no weapons, except his hands. He tackled the nearest Korvath, using his weight to bear the larger alien down. They crashed into the wall. The cubs watched as their teacher fought with nothing but determination. A rifle butt hit Doyun's head. He fell hard. The Korvath soldiers surrounded him. One of them kicked him again. But Doyun was crawling, bleeding from a dozen wounds, barely conscious. He was crawling toward the shelter door. "The cubs!" he gasped. "Worth it. All worth it." A Korvath raised his rifle for a killing shot. Inside the shelter, Isul's claws extended. She didn't know they could do that. She'd never used her claws for anything but climbing and playing. But watching Doyun bleed for them, something changed in her small body. Her fur stood on end. Her lips pulled back from her teeth. For the first time in Velkari history, a cub felt rage. Doyun reached the door. With his last strength, he pulled out the control panel and smashed it with his fist. Sparks flew. The door's lock engaged from the outside, sealing completely. No one could open it now without cutting through reinforced metal. "No!" the Korvath leader shouted, understanding what had happened. "That door leads somewhere important." Doyun collapsed against the sealed door. His blood was spreading across the floor. He looked up at the Korvath and smiled, through broken teeth. "Just a closet," he lied. "Worth dying to see your faces." The Korvath leader snarled. "Kill him." But Doyun was already dying. His eyes found the crack in the door one last time. He couldn't see the cubs clearly, but he knew they were there. "Stay safe, little ones," he whispered. "Be brave." His eyes closed. The cubs watched their Sky Father die. They watched the Korvath soldiers argue about the sealed door. They watched the soldiers finally give up and move deeper into the station, looking for easier targets. Then there was silence. Inside the shelter, 12 cubs huddled together. No one spoke. No one moved. They had promised Doyun they would stay hidden and silent. But everything had changed. Isul looked at her paws. She had claws. Sharp ones. She'd never noticed how sharp they were before. She looked at Minho, at Jiwan, at all the others. They all had claws. They all had teeth. He didn't run, Minho said softly. His voice was different now. Harder. He could have run. He chose to fight. For us, Jiwan added. She was shaking, but not from fear anymore. Isul pressed her paw against the door, right where Doyun's body lay on the other side. His blood was seeping under the crack. She touched it, bringing her paw away red. We have claws, she said. We have teeth. We have muscles and speed. She looked at the others. Why don't we use them? 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 Because we're Velkari, one of the other cubs said. We don't fight. It's not our way. It wasn't our way, Isul corrected. But Doyun showed us something. He showed us that some things are worth fighting for. She looked down at the blood on her paw. He showed us that love without strength is just grief waiting to happen. The cubs gathered around her. Through the door, they could hear distant sounds of the Korvath moving through the station. They could hear Velkari adults being captured, their peaceful cries echoing. What do we do? We remember, Isul said. Her young voice was steady despite her tears. We remember everything. How he stood. How he fought. How he smiled even when dying. She looked at each cub. We remember, and someday, we make them pay. The council won't allow it, another cub said. Fighting isn't the Velkari way. Then maybe the Velkari way needs to change, Isul said. They stayed in that shelter for 3 days. They had food and water, just as Doyun had prepared. They stayed silent, just as he'd taught them. Through the door, they could smell his body, the blood that had dried on the floor. On the 3rd day, they heard different voices. Human voices. Search every room. Look for survivors. When the human soldiers finally cut through the sealed door, they found 12 Velkari cubs sitting in a circle around a makeshift memorial. They'd drawn pictures of Doyun on the walls using colored supplies from the shelter. In every picture, he was standing between them and danger. The soldier in charge was named Taewon. He looked at Doyun's body, at the 3 dead Korvath nearby, at the cubs with their strange, hard eyes. He held the line, Taewon said quietly. 1 man. No real weapons. He held them off long enough. Isul stood up. She walked to Taewon and looked up at him. Teach us, she said. Teach you what? How to fight, how to protect, how to make them fear us the way we fear them. Her voice didn't waver. Doyun showed us why. Now show us how. Taewon looked at these cubs and saw something he'd never seen in Velkari before. He saw anger. He saw determination. He saw the birth of something new. I'll teach you, he promised. 6 months had passed since Havenmoor fell. The refugee camp sprawled across 3 levels of an old mining station. Hundreds of Velkari lived there now, displaced from their homes. They did what they'd always done, making art and studying science, trying to pretend their world hadn't shattered. But in a small training room on the lowest level, 12 young Velkari were learning to break things. Taewon watched as Isul practiced hand strikes against a padded target. Her form was getting better. The other cubs worked around the room, their movements still awkward, but improving. Again, Taewon said, remember, you're fast. Use that speed. Isul struck 3 times in rapid succession. Her claws, no longer trimmed in the traditional Velkari way, left marks in the padding. A human medic named Hyarin entered the room. She carried medical supplies and a worried expression. They're just children, Taewon. They're survivors, he replied. And they asked for this. Hyrin watched Minho execute a rolling dodge, something no Velkari had done in thousands of years of evolution. The elders are upset. They say you're corrupting their culture. Their culture got them killed, Taewon said flatly. 40% casualties at Havenmore. The Korvath took the rest as slaves. He gestured to the cubs. These 12 lived because one human taught them that sometimes peace isn't an option. Isul paused her training and approached them. She was taller now. Her silver fur marked with scars from practice. Is something wrong? Bora wants to speak with you, Hyrin said gently. She's waiting outside. She's waiting outside. The other cubs stopped training. They all looked at Isul. In 6 months, she'd become their leader, without anyone officially deciding it. It had just happened, naturally. I'll go, Isul said. Bora waited in the corridor. Her blue fur had gone dull since the attack. She looked at Isul and flinched. The young Velkari moved differently now, with a predator's awareness. Little one. Bora began. I'm not little anymore, Isul interrupted. Not rudely, just stating fact. Bora's ears folded back. This isn't our way. Violence, combat training, these human weapons you practice with. We're Velkari. We're scholars and artists. We were, Isul said. Then the Korvath came. Then Doyun died, protecting us. She looked at Bora steadily. How many Velkari did you save by talking peacefully? How many negotiations worked? Bora looked away. Violence only creates more violence, and peace only works when everyone chooses it, Isul replied. The Korvath didn't choose peace. They chose to take, to kill, to enslave. Our peaceful way didn't stop them. She touched the wall where someone had painted a memorial to Havenmore's victims. Doyun's violent way saved 12 cubs. He was one person. What can you do, even trained? Isul smiled, and it was a human expression, showing teeth. Let's find out. News traveled fast among refugee populations. Within a week, young Velkari from other stations were arriving at the mining facility. They came in ones and twos at first, then in larger groups. They all had the same story. They'd lost family to Korvath raids. They'd hidden while others died. They'd been peaceful, and it had cost them everything. Now they wanted to learn. Taewon's small training room couldn't hold them all. There were 50 cubs now, then 100, then 200. Human Military Command noticed. They sent more trainers, proper equipment, and one very stern officer named Salmon. You're creating an army, Salmon said to Taewon. She was older, with gray in her hair and combat ribbons on her uniform that told stories of a dozen wars. I'm teaching self-defense, Taewon argued. Salmon looked through the observation window at the training floor. Young Velkari ran obstacle courses with human soldiers, their natural agility turning them into graceful fighters. This is more than self-defense. This is organized military training. They asked for it. I know. Salmon surprised him by smiling. I read the report about Havenmore, about the human teacher who died holding the line. She looked at the cubs again. Doyun, right? They talk about him constantly. They made a shrine, Taewon said. In the central hall. His picture, his broken plasma cutter, things he owned. They pray there every morning. Velkari don't have religion. They do now. Salmon was quiet for a moment. The Korvath are expanding again. 2 more Velkari colonies have fallen in the past month. The Galactic Council issues statements and does nothing. And? Taewon asked, knowing there was more. And humanity is tired of watching species get enslaved while politicians talk. Salmon turned to him. If these cubs want to fight, we'll help them. Officially, full military support, equipment, training, but they need to understand what they're choosing. That evening, Saman addressed all the young Velkari in the main hall. 300 of them sat before her, cubs and young adults, all bearing the same hard look in their eyes. War is ugly, Saman told them. It's not like your training exercises. It's blood and screaming and watching friends die. It's nightmares that never stop. It's becoming something you can't undo. She paused. Your elders are right about one thing. If you do this, you'll never be the same Velkari again. Good, Isul said from the front row. The old Velkari died easily. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Saman nodded slowly. Then let's begin. Real training. Real weapons. Real combat doctrine. She looked at each young face. Let's make sure Doyun's lesson wasn't wasted. The training intensified. Human engineers studied Velkari physiology and designed equipment specifically for them. Light armor that didn't restrict their flexibility. Claw-mounted blades that extended their natural weapons. Rifles sized for smaller hands but firing full-power charges. Hiren taught field medicine, showing them how to treat wounds and stabilize the injured. Doyun would want you to survive, not just fight, she told them repeatedly. The cubs absorbed everything. They were natural learners, raised in a culture that valued education. Now, they applied that same dedication to combat. Minho became expert at close-quarters fighting. His strength, unusual for a Velkari, made him formidable. Jiwan discovered she had a gift for long-range shooting. Her artistic eye translated perfectly to calculating angles and distances. She could put a round through a target from half a kilometer away. Others found their own talents. Some excelled at stealth, their silent movement making them perfect scouts. Some mastered tactics and strategy, their scholarly minds adapting to military planning, and Isul led them all. She wasn't the strongest or the fastest or the best shot, but she had something else. Something Doyun had taught by example. She had the will to do what was necessary. 3 months into the new training, they got their first mission. A Korvath supply convoy was moving through a disputed sector. Intelligence suggested it carried supplies destined for Velkari slave camps. Soman offered the mission to Isul's group. It's dangerous, Soman warned. This isn't training. Real Korvath soldiers. Real combat. Isul looked at her team. 20 Velkari, armed and armored, standing ready. We've been ready since Havenmoor, she said. The ambush was surgical. The Velkari hit the convoy in deep space, moving through the transport ship's corridors like ghosts. The Korvath had expected weak Velkari, if they expected anything at all. They got trained predators instead. Isul's team killed 12 Korvath soldiers and captured the rest. They freed 24 Velkari slaves from the hold. Not a single Velkari warrior was killed. When they returned to base, the freed slaves stared at their rescuers in shock. You're Velkari? One asked. But you fought. You killed. We're Doyun's pride, Isul said, using the name her group had taken. And we remember what he taught us. The successful mission changed everything. More young Velkari volunteered. More human support arrived. More equipment, more trainers, more recognition. The Galactic Council noticed too. They sent observers who watched the training with horror and fascination. A pacifist species, learning war was unprecedented. But the Korvath Empire noticed most of all. They put bounties on the traitor cubs. They issued warnings about Velkari who had abandoned their nature. They promised harsh punishment for any Velkari caught in military actions. Isul read the Korvath statements and laughed. It was a cold sound. Nothing like the chirping joy of traditional Velkari. They're afraid, she told her team. They should be. In her quarters, Isul kept Doyun's broken plasma cutter on a shelf. Every night before sleep, she held it and remembered. She remembered his smile as he died. She remembered his promise to always protect them. She remembered the lesson written in his blood. Some things are worth fighting for. And soon, very soon, the Korvath would learn what happened when you taught prey to bite back. 3 years after Havenmore burned, the galaxy was learning a new truth. Valkyrie could fight. Isul stood on the bridge of a human frigate, watching the tactical display. She was fully grown now, taller and leaner than traditional Valkyrie. Scars marked her silver fur, each one earned in combat. Her armor was custom-built, black with silver markings that honored Doyun's memory. Target acquired, the human tactical officer reported. Korvath Supply Depot, Sector 7. Minimal defense fleet. How minimal? Isul asked. 3 cruisers, maybe a dozen fighter craft. Minho, standing beside her, grinned. His orange-striped fur was hidden beneath combat armor. We've taken worse. We've taken worse. Isul nodded. Send the signal. All teams prepare for insertion. Doyun's pride had grown. What started as 12 cubs was now 300 trained warriors. They'd fought 17 engagements over 3 years. They'd freed 6 Valkyrie slave colonies. They'd destroyed countless Korvath supply lines. And they'd lost only 8 of their own. The humans provided ships and heavy weapons. But the Valkyrie did the close-quarters work. They were faster, quieter, deadlier, in tight spaces. The Korvath had learned to fear the shadows, because that's where Valkyrie warriors hunted. The insertion was smooth. 30 Valkyrie, in drop pods, launched from the frigate toward the depot's surface. Isul felt the familiar pressure of deceleration, heard the pod's engines screaming, then impact. Gentle as a kiss, the pod door blew open. Isul moved. The depot was a sprawling facility built into an asteroid. Warehouses and barracks, all protected by automated defenses and Korvath soldiers. Intelligence said 200 soldiers were stationed here. Isul's team moved through the shadows. Their armor dampened sound and heat signatures. To sensors, they were ghosts. The first Korvath patrol never knew what hit them. 6 soldiers, dead in 6 seconds. Claws and silenced weapons, fast and efficient. Team 2, status? Isul whispered into her comm. Minho's voice came back. East warehouse secured. Found slave pens. 80 Valkyrie, all alive. Get them to the extraction point. Team 3? Jiwan answered from her sniper position. I have overwatch. Korvath are scrambling. They know something's wrong but can't find you. Isul smiled. This was what they'd trained for. The Korvath built their empire on strength and terror. But they'd never fought an enemy that turned fear into a weapon. The depot commander was in the central building. Isul's team hit it from 3 sides. Explosives took out the doors. Flashbangs disoriented the guards. Then the Valkyrie were inside, moving like liquid death through the corridors. The commander was a massive Korvath general named Krath. He'd personally overseen the enslavement of 2 Valkyrie worlds. His office was decorated with trophies taken from dead Valkyrie. He stood when Isul entered, reaching for his weapon. She was faster. Her claws raked across his arm, sending the gun flying. He swung at her with his other hand, but she ducked, driving a blade up into his armpit where the armor gapped. Krath screamed. He fell to his knees. Isul stood over him. You enslaved my people. You thought we were weak. You thought we were weak. You are weak, Krath gasped. Prey animals playing soldier. Then why are you on your knees? Isul asked. She could have killed him. Every fiber of her being wanted to. But Doyun had died protecting. Not for revenge. There was a difference. You're going to send a message to your empire, Isul said. Tell them Doyun's pride is coming. Tell them every Valkyrie you've enslaved will be freed. Tell them we remember. And we don't forgive. She left him there, alive but broken, and led her team out. The freed Valkyrie slaves stared at their rescuers with wonder and fear. These warriors didn't look like the peaceful Valkyrie they remembered. The extraction was clean. Human ships provided cover as the Valkyrie teams lifted off. The depot's defenses were in ruins. its supplies destroyed, its slaves freed. As the frigate jumped to hyperspace, Salman met Isul in the debriefing room. The human commander looked tired but satisfied. 17 missions, 17 victories, Salman said. The Korvath are starting to take you seriously. Good, Isul replied. Fear is a tool. Let them be afraid. The bounty on your head is up to 5 million credits now. Isul shrugged. They can't spend credits if they're dead. Salman pulled up a holographic star map. We've got a problem. The Korvath are consolidating their forces. They're pulling back from minor holdings and concentrating around their core territories. She highlighted several systems, including Velkar Prime. 7. Velkar. Isul's breath caught. Velkar Prime. The Velkari homeworld. It had fallen to the Korvath 2 years ago. 1 million Velkari enslaved in the labor camps there. Intelligence suggests they're fortifying it as a central hub, Salman continued. They know we're coming eventually. They're preparing. How many Korvath? Fleet strength? 40 capital ships, maybe 200 support craft. Ground forces estimated at 50,000 soldiers. Salman looked at Isul. It's a fortress. Hitting it would require a full military campaign, not a raid. Then we run a campaign, Isul said simply. You have 300 fighters. We'll get more. And they did. The call went out across every Velkari refugee settlement, every freed colony, every station where displaced Velkari had gathered. Come fight for your homeworld. Come learn what Doyun taught. Young Velkari answered. Hundreds of them. They came from all over, drawn by the legend of the cubs who learned to roar. Taiwan oversaw the expanded training program. Hyarin trained medical teams. Human engineers built more equipment. Salman coordinated with Human Military Command to commit fleet assets. Doyun's pride grew to 2,000 warriors. 2,000 Velkari who'd learned that peace was a choice, not a mandate. That protection sometimes required violence. That love could wear armor and carry weapons. Bora came to see Isul one night before the assault on Velkar Prime was scheduled. The elder, Velkari, looked ancient now, worn down by grief and change. I don't recognize our people anymore, Bora said quietly. Isul was cleaning her rifle, a routine she'd learned from human soldiers. We're still Velkari. We still value art and learning. We still care for our young. We've just added one more value. Violence. Survival. Isul corrected. The Korvath didn't give us a choice. Bora. They came to our peaceful stations and killed us. They enslaved our families. They laughed while we begged for mercy. She looked up. Doyun showed me something. He showed me that the universe doesn't care about our ideals. It only respects strength. He would hate what you've become. Bora said. Isul smiled sadly. He died, so we could become anything at all. I honor that, by making sure we never die helplessly again. Bora left without another word. Isul knew the elders would never understand. They'd grown up in a different universe, one where peace worked because everyone wanted it. That universe was gone. The assault on Velkar Prime began at dawn. Though dawn was meaningless in space, human capital ships engaged the Korvath fleet, while Velkari strike teams deployed to the surface. Isul led the primary assault on the main labor camp. 200 Velkari warriors dropped from orbit, their pods screaming through the atmosphere. The Korvath were ready this time. They'd learned from previous defeats. Automated defenses tracked the pods. Anti-air fire filled the sky. 6 pods were destroyed before landing. 36 Velkari died in the drop, but the rest made it down. Isul's pod crashed through the roof of a guard barracks. She was fighting before the smoke cleared. Claws and rifle fire, moving through the Korvath soldiers like death itself. The labor camp held 10,000 Velkari slaves. They'd been worked to exhaustion, beaten, broken. When the first warrior teams breached the pens, The slaves didn't recognize their own kind. "We're here to free you," Minho shouted over the weapon fire. "We're taking back our world." The freed Velkari stumbled out, weak and confused. Some cried. Some laughed. Some just stood in shock, unable to believe it was real. Jiwan provided cover from a tower position, her rifle singing its deadly song. Korvath officers fell one by one, picked off with surgical precision. The battle raged for 6 hours. The Korvath fought hard, but they were defending multiple positions against coordinated attacks. The Velkari knew the terrain, moved faster, struck harder. By evening, the main camp was theirs. 10,000 slaves freed, 1,000 Korvath dead or captured. And the Velkari losses, while painful, were minimal. Standing in the ruins of the camp, Isul looked up at the sky. Human ships were still fighting the Korvath fleet above. The war wasn't over. But this battle was won. She touched the broken plasma cutter she always carried. "We remember, Doyun. We remember everything you taught us." The battle for Velkar Prime lasted 3 days. Isul stood in what had been the Korvath command center, now burning and broken. Around her, Velkari warriors secured the building while human marines held the perimeter. The sounds of distant fighting still echoed across the city. "Final count," Minho reported. He was wounded, a plasma burn across his shoulder, but still standing. 22 labor camps liberated. 800,000 Velkari freed. The Korvath ground forces are in retreat. "And our losses?" Isul asked. 237 dead. 400 wounded. Each number was a name. A face. Someone who'd learned to fight. Who'd believed in Doyun's lesson. Isul felt the weight of every single one. Jiwan entered the command center. Her sniper rifle was slung across her back. "The Korvath Emperor's palace is still holding. They've concentrated their elite guard there. Maybe 500 soldiers. All veterans." Through the broken windows, Isul could see the palace in the distance. It was a massive structure built from black stone, a monument to Korvath conquest. The Emperor had made Velkar Prime his regional capital, a deliberate insult to the Velkari people. "What's the status of the fleet battle?" Isul asked. A human communications officer looked up from his console. "Commander Salmon reports the Korvath reinforcements have arrived. The battle is even now. She says she can hold them off, but she can't guarantee how long." Isul looked at her team. These warriors who'd started as terrified cubs, who'd watched a human die for them, who'd learned that love sometimes wore armor and carried weapons. "We end this now," she said. "We take the palace. We capture the Emperor. We show the galaxy that Velkari aren't prey anymore." The assault on the palace began at sunset. The sky above was filled with ships fighting, human and Korvath vessels trading fire. Every explosion lit the darkening sky like terrible fireworks. Isul led 100 Velkari warriors toward the palace gates. The Korvath defenders were ready. Heavy weapons, fortified positions, soldiers who'd fought 100 battles. The first wave of Velkari fell to concentrated fire. 20 warriors cut down before they reached the walls, but the rest kept coming. They used their speed, their agility, everything they'd learned. They climbed walls the Korvath thought unclimbable. They found gaps in the defenses that larger species would have missed. Taiwan led a squad of human marines in support. They provided covering fire, while the Velkari moved. It was the partnership they'd built over 3 years of fighting together. "Breach in the east wall," Taiwan reported over comms. "Velkari teams are inside." Isul was with them. She moved through the palace corridors like a shadow with teeth. Her claws were red. Her rifle was empty, discarded for closer work. The Korvath elite guard fought hard. These were professional soldiers, the best their empire had, but they'd never faced anything like Velkari warriors. Minho's team hit them from one side. Jiwan's snipers took out officers from elevated positions. Isul's assault group struck from another angle. The Korvath found themselves fighting on 3 fronts in tight corridors where their size was a disadvantage. The battle was brutal. Hand to hand, claw and blade, in narrow hallways filled with smoke and blood. Isul lost count of how many Korvath she killed. She fought with a cold precision, remembering every lesson Taewon had taught. Every move Doyun would have been proud of. They found the Emperor in his throne room. He was massive, even for a Korvath, covered in battle scars and ceremonial armor. Around him stood his personal guard, 20 of the finest warriors his empire could produce. "So the prey animals learned to bite," the Emperor said. His voice was deep, mocking. "Do you think this changes anything? My empire spans 100 worlds. Kill me, and another will take my place." Isul walked forward, her armor scorched and dented, her fur matted with blood. Not all of it was Korvath blood. "You came to our stations," she said. "You killed our families. You enslaved our people. You thought we were weak because we chose peace. You were weak," the Emperor replied. "You are weak. You're playing at war, but you're still just prey." "A human taught me something," Isul said. "He taught me that strength isn't about size or weapons or how many worlds you conquer." She raised her claws. "Strength is deciding what you're willing to die for. What you're willing to kill for." The Emperor's guards attacked. 20 elite warriors against 1 Valkyrie, but Isul wasn't alone. Minho hit them from the left. Jiwon's shot took out 1 guard from a balcony entrance. More Valkyrie warriors poured into the room. The fight was chaos. The throne room became a battlefield. The Emperor's guards were skilled, but the Valkyrie fought with something the Korvath had never understood. They fought for the cubs who'd hidden behind a door, for the teacher who'd bled protecting them, for every peaceful Valkyrie who'd died begging for mercy that never came. The guards fell one by one. Finally, only the Emperor remained. He was wounded, bleeding from a dozen cuts. Isul stood before him, breathing hard, her claws extended. "Kill me then," the Emperor spat. "Prove you're just like us." Isul looked at him. She thought about Doyun, about what he'd died for. He hadn't died for revenge. He'd died so cubs could live. "No," she said. "I'm not like you. Doyun taught me to fight, but he also taught me why. I fight to protect, not to conquer." She signaled her warriors. "Take him. He'll stand trial for his crimes. The galaxy will see that justice exists, even for emperors." The Emperor was dragged away. Outside, the sounds of fighting were dying down. The Korvath forces were surrendering. Hierin found Isul in the throne room. The human medic looked exhausted, her uniform stained with blood from treating wounded. "We've won," Hierin said. "The Korvath fleet is retreating. Saman drove them off. The planet is ours." Isul nodded slowly. She felt no joy, only a bone-deep weariness. "How many did we lose?" "Final count is still coming in. At least 300 Valkyrie dead. Twice that wounded." Hierin put a hand on Isul's shoulder. "But 800,000 freed. The homeworld reclaimed. The Korvath Empire is suing for peace." "Peace," Isul repeated. The word felt strange in her mouth. 3 days later, the Korvath Empire sent ambassadors. They agreed to return all conquered Valkyrie territories. They agreed to pay reparations. They agreed to stand trial for war crimes. The galaxy watched in shock. A pacifist species had become warriors. An empire had been humbled. But for Isul, standing at the monument they'd built in the capital square, the victory felt hollow. The monument was simple. A statue of a human male, surrounded by 12 cubs. The inscription read, "He was not our blood, but he bled for us. We were not warriors, but he taught us fury." This human showed the galaxy that family is not species. Love is not weakness. And those who harm the innocent will face the wrath of those who remember. Doyun's broken plasma cutter rested at the statue's base, preserved in crystal. Somin stood beside Isul. You did it. You liberated your people. Doyun did it, Isul said quietly. He showed us the way. We just followed. What will you do now? Go back to being scholars and artists? Isul looked out over the city. Velkari were rebuilding, reclaiming their world. But things had changed. There were young Velkari in uniform now, training to defend their people. The Velkari Defense Force, they called themselves. Doyun's pride had become something bigger. We'll never forget how to fight, Isul said. But we'll never forget why we learned, either. We fight to protect, to defend, never to conquer. Bora approached them. The elder Velkari looked at the monument, at the statue of Doyun. Tears ran down her face. I didn't understand, Bora said. I thought violence would destroy us. But you kept the core of what we are. You protected it by learning to fight. Doyun showed us balance, Isul said. Be peaceful, but be ready. Love deeply, but defend fiercely. Never seek war, but never let it destroy you unprepared. In the sky above, human and Velkari ships patrolled together. The partnership had been forged in blood and fire, and it would last. Years later, Isul had cubs of her own. She brought them to the monument often. She told them about Doyun, about his lessons, about the day everything changed. Was he brave? Her youngest asked, looking up at the statue. He was terrified, Isul said honestly, but he fought anyway. That's what courage is, being afraid and doing what's right anyway. Will you teach us to fight? I'll teach you to protect, Isul said. To defend those who can't defend themselves. To be strong so others don't have to be. That's what Doyun taught me. She touched the crystal case holding the broken plasma cutter. After all these years, it still brought tears to her eyes. Remember, she told her cubs, using the word that had become sacred to Velkari warriors. Remember those who bled for you. Remember why we fight. Remember that peace is worth fighting for. The cubs chirped their understanding. A new generation, growing up in a world that knew both art and war, peace and strength. Above them, the sky was clear. No more burning ships, no more fighting. But the Velkari would never forget the lesson written in a human's blood. Some things were worth dying for. Some things were worth killing for. And family, whether born or chosen, was worth everything. Isul looked at the statue one last time, at Doyun's face frozen in stone, forever protecting the cubs around him. Thank you, Sky Father, she whispered. We remember. We'll always remember. And in every Velkari heart, from the warriors who'd learned to roar to the cubs who would inherit that legacy, the lesson echoed eternal. Love fiercely. Protect fearlessly. And never forget those who bleed for you. The galaxy had changed. The Velkari had changed. And it had all begun with one human teacher who chose to stand when he could have run, who chose to fight when he could have hidden, who chose love over survival. Doyun's lesson would live forever, carried in the hearts of the cubs who learned fury, and written in the stars where the sky had burned with their vengeance.